Our next guest speaker today is Mr. Patrick Johnson. He's the boss of me. He, that's good. Dr. Patrick Johnson. No? Mr. Patrick, he's the boss of me. He doesn't want an introduction. Go, Patrick.
Performance evaluations are coming up, so I understand. March 31st, you're all good. 5s across the board. You'll see. In case you were wondering, by the way, when I first met Diva and I kind of pitched the idea of the job, I was like, this is going to be easy, right? Piece of cake. She goes, I don't know much about DoD. Yeah, small organization, kind of like the FBI. You'll be great. I said, by the way, where's that accent from? She said, Southwest Louisiana. I thought that was worth mentioning. I would like to take this time to thank Admiral Garvin and General Lawrence, AFCEA, the AFCEA team. This would not have been possible because I know when my team, 2 people, their last name starts with Eisner and Rodriguez, told me they had been drinking. I said, we've got an idea. All right. I said, a lot of good ideas. How are you going to pay for your good idea? So we thought about partnering with AFCEA, and we came to them. And it's kind of, you ever seen the Chris Rock skit where he comes in to McDonald's and he says, got just a little bit of change in his pocket. How much for one nugget? And we were kind of like that in our approach. Can we get, for this much? And I think they have done an outstanding job. They've impressed me immensely. We've worked with you in the past. In this environment, facing the challenges that we faced, and I know the room's kind of thinning, and I apologize that you're stuck with me at 1600 at the close of the day. All right? But I'm going to try to make it worth your while. I've listened to our speakers and love it. We're all tracking ourselves in the same direction. That's great, right? But my job, okay, is to take the step beyond the theoretical, beyond the high level, and begin to execute on those things and drive that change. So, for those of you, I want to take us back a little ways to 1992. Okay, and anybody in here that doesn't remember 1992 because you were not conscious at that time, I hate you. Okay? There was a movie that came out during that time period. I really like that movie, and I want to kind of set the scene for you. All right? It's called A Few Good Men. So the scene, the climax is the 2 protagonists. All right? One, the colonel, and the lieutenant. So Tom Cruise, Jack Nicholson's character, and it's getting, all right, the colonel to confess. So we saw the scene, you can't handle the truth. Let's talk about that. Kathy gets him on the stand, he gets ready to go, and then Nicholson breaks into a great monologue that I really love. And he says, son, we live in a world that has walls. And on those walls, they have to be guarded by men with guns. Who's going to do that? You, Lieutenant Weinberg? I have a greater responsibility than you can possibly fathom. You weep for Santiago and you curse the Marines. You have that luxury. You have the luxury of not knowing what I know, that Santiago's death, while tragic, probably saved lives. My existence, while grotesque and incomprehensible to you, saves lives. You don't want the truth because deep down in places you don't talk about at parties, you want me on that wall. You need me on that wall. What? All right. I know that you're 12 and you don't remember. Colonel Nasib Jessup. He was a product of the Cold War. You set that time. Think about 1992. The fall of the Berlin Wall, all of that had transpired. and we were reaping the peace dividend, right? We were going through something similar now as we begin to draw down the force. But how many would know while watching that program at that time that we would look back and say, you know what? You know what I miss? The Soviet Union. I miss the Cold War. Those were the good days because the world actually seemed to make sense as opposed to the threats and the threat surfaces we have to cover now. We are dealing with things that were incomprehensible at that time. The world still has walls, but they're not so much physical. And it still has men and women on those walls. We need them on those walls, but they're not carrying a weapon. The people on those walls are the weapon. The human operating system. In cyber, the weapon system is the person. We focus too often on the tech, right? The new shiny toy. Consistently, when we have conferences and we talk about cyber and we roll in, workforce tends to be an afterthought or off on the corner. So it really makes me happy to have this kind of support and this kind of focus. And even at 4 o'clock, you're still sitting in here listening to us talk about this. So here's what I've taken away listening to my senior leaders today. All right? 3 things. And it seems to be consistent and a thread through that. The first is we need to rethink how we train leaders. And I hear this from the audience and hear this there. We have a cyber force of 225,000, right? That's approximate because getting our hands around the number of contractors is a little more difficult than people imagine. But it doesn't diminish the fact that we have that size. And you compare that to some nations, let's take England, for example, we exceed their entire national defense force. They used to have an army, but they dropped down. All right? So when we're looking at this, all right, and we're looking at the scope and scale, it's not just the mission force. And that's been the focus today. We're talking about the mission force. But guess what? The mission force is about 3 to 4% of our overall effort. I've listened to people talk about entry point and where we need to go, right? There is room within the cyber domain, which, by the way, when we talk cybersecurity, that's about 14,000 people within the department, all right? If we look at IT, which is also a focus, that's another 40,000 people within the department. So it's about how do we train those leaders and then tie that into our senior leaders? And then the second thing, operational planning. How do we best deploy the effects to achieve the impact and degradation on our foe that is necessary? And the third thing, we need to relook at our training environment. And I like to liken this, we need a national training center, an NTC, right, in which we can operate at scale. General Stanton brought up a good point, and it really highlights for those people that looked at large-scale operations at the core level, the division level. We had the talks. In fact, you could cover half a football field with all the stuff out there. Think about what's happening in Ukraine right now. You roll out your talks and light up like a Christmas tree, I can tell you those lights are going to be blown out in about 30 minutes. There are eyes in the sky. Ukraine is driving this year for 2.4 million drones. And you can bet that their drones aren't going to cost 100, or let's say 10 million or 15 million apiece. All right? It has completely rechanged that in terms of what we have to look at. So that's what I heard from leadership. I don't know if you took away the same thing. All right? Here's the second thing that I took away from that. So here are the ideas. We're good. We're all tracking. Here's the executors on the ground doing the fight. The ideas don't travel, the concepts don't travel and reach the executors. That calcified middle, somewhere in there within the machine, is sucking up the good ideas and we're not letting it get pushed down. That's an observation for me. Could get fired later. But I'm seeing that. And the people sitting in this room, especially on the operational side of things, when we say there are things I want to do, there's things I want to achieve, Ms. Arrington was very, very clear. We are in an ideal moment in which I used to call it the axis of obstruction. The players have changed. The mission has not. These are people that can only say no, not yes. We have an opportunity to kind of break some of this loose to make some of these things happen. Let's talk about rotational programs going out to industry. How do we do that? All right. Well, believe it or not, it's in your program. We have multiple programs to do this. Do you know what the participation rate in that is for the last 2 years? Almost zero. Almost zero. Do you know why? Leadership said that's a really great thing. Management says, no, you can't go. That's what I'm talking about. Take the intent, force the calcified middle to relent, and help our operational force. We can bring things online and we can do things differently or say we're going to do it differently, but vision without execution is hallucination. That's where we come in. We are pushing the boundaries. I have learned to become, not just to Mark, an irritant to the machine, right? It's what's necessary to push and push. When people say no, I'm like, that's the beginning of the conversation. So that's where I'm coming from. What I would like to do, as I've set the stage, I want to hear from the audience. I want to kind of go into questions. So the first part, and I would love to hear this, I will seed this, specialized training, creating a cyber specialized center. If we look at Cyber Command 2.0, we want to create this, we want to set this up. I don't think we have to create it anew. I think we have a place already, right? It's called CIC. Difference is we have to reconfigure CIC. We have to change how they think about educating. There is a professional military education aspect to that. We keep that, but I believe CIC could be so much more. I'm interested in hearing from you what you think that is. Question earlier that came up. How much technical training do we need to introduce into this curriculum? I can tell you right now, having very familiar with the offerings, you need to bump that by about 40%. If you're going to do operational planning, you can't just follow a book. You need to have a technical understanding of what you're working with and deploying. All right? I will tell you, and I will credit this to General Stanton and others, the great thing about cyber is you can't fake the funk. I can't walk in here and you set me down in front of the keyboard. Real life story. I was put into an operations position at a very early stage in my career, and they asked me at the time, everything was running on Access databases, knew zero. So nobody told me I was supposed to know that. And when I got there, they said, you know Access, right? And I was like, sure. Said, set me down in front of a computer, and it wasn't a Commodore 64. They set me down in front of a computer, and they said, okay, I need you to do these queries and build this out. I was like, looking at the keyboard. No, that's not how I type. That's only angry typing. Alfredo. My point in there, I know this is an area you can't fake the funk in. Our focus is not to add bureaucracy on top of the qualification level, but to create an agile and responsive qualification process that we can measure and ensure that from a readiness perspective, is my force ready to go tonight? Are we ready to fight? And I can say yes, or it is not. And these are the things we need to do to get it ready. So I look at CIC moving forward in the future, becoming a much bigger part of that. I'm interested in what the audience might think about that. And then in terms of a national training center, that type of scenario, I know we have the persistent training environment, but I believe scope and scale of that is too small. I believe you need to take the division out and turn everything on at once and find out none of it works. Because when you cross the line, that is not the time to find out. Probably should have thought of that. Experiential learning on the battlefield is costly. I like to say stupid never dies alone. So Let's make those mistakes in an area large enough that it can encompass and let our leaders learn, right? You're operating in the information environment. You need to know, not just if you push beyond your comms range, all right? But the data you're pushing, where it's coming from, you go blind, right? Is the plan to whip out the lensatic compass and start throwing the maps? How are we going to do this? So I'm looking to that and looking to your ideas, and I'll go ahead right now and open this up for questions. Yes, if you ask no questions, we can leave 30 minutes early.
I know you don't need me to encourage you to the microphone, but if you needed that extra push. Oh, yes. I had lunch with this gentleman today.
Yeah, sir. One question for you, and I
Yes.
didn't want to. I didn't want to leave the microphone too dry. So just to reiterate, though, so I'm a reservist. I have reserve soldiers that were training in the cyber domain. If I have them email this email address, are they going to receive a response with potential abilities to come with you and do some on-the-job training?
So that's a really good question. I will tell you, and I'm honest, if you want to know about it from policy perspective and some of what we're doing, more than happy to entertain that, and yet we have a response. All right. Now, you asked the question earlier on the reserve force, and I'd like to kind of bring that up. So how do we engage the reserve force? How do we allow our folks to go to training? These are the things I'm beyond thinking about, well, that's a good idea. I now have ways to execute. So think about this for an example. In our reserve structure, we have greater structure there than we have in our active component mission force. Do we use that structure properly? You are correct, right? I don't think we do. I think there's a little bias there. I think we need to change that paradigm. If you have at the master level, all right, and we can say across the services, you're looking at probably less than three dozen. And you think about that, right? Our tip of the spear, that's not a lot of people. And you will ride that horse until it breaks. How do you take them offline and not suffer? You know what? You pull up your reserve force. All right. We already have examples of this. If you're in the Navy Reserve, ships afloat, they replace in and out. They never come into port necessarily, or if they do, drop off and pick up to let people go and carry on the mission. We need that same concept with reserve. We should be employing the reserve force more strategically. You should be more involved in that process, and that means training the reserve force up to a certain level. Then flip that over. We talked about how do we let folks move between components, industry, civilians. Another great idea. So I'm going to employ the reserve and several different concepts. So we can start with an auxiliary force in which we reach out to key industry insiders. Right now, how many people do you think we have in the department outside of DARPA are quantum literate and are experts? I'm asking you because Congress recently asked me, and I was like, you're kidding, right? So where do we go? We need to have that auxiliary to tap, where we maintain security clearances, where we read them up. And by the way, if you're thinking any of this is original to me, it's not. I specialize because I have an Alabama public school education in hiring people far smarter than me. Scott Nelson is one of those people that I captured that vision from. And I said, you know what, that makes great sense, Scott. Let's build that auxiliary. I even have a better idea. When we've got those operators that are fried and they've said, you know what, I've had all the fun I can have, I've been all I can be, it's time for me to go do something else. Really love the mission, but there's things and aspects about it I didn't love. What if I said to them, all right, I'm going to help you get a job. And in return, all you need to do is join the reserve. Now, that sounds counterintuitive, but these are some of the things we're looking at. How do we resolve the involvement of the reserve? How do we relieve our beleaguered mission force. They're tired. They're on mission all the time. These are some of the ideas that I'm entertaining. We have the capability to execute these things, right? But I know that can't be everything. So I'm very interested in other things. Does that help? Okay.
Mr. Fickle.
Hello. Derek Fickle, 8140 Nerd. I get the nerd chills all the time. Okay, so we've heard great things from leadership. We've heard great ideas, Mr. Johnson, coming from you about the things that you want to get done. Everything you're saying, we're like, yes, ranges, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. So is this all part within the implementation plan? And if so, what is the timeline for all these things to come about so that when we can start talking to our folks, we can kind of give them a good strategic, like, hey, this is coming and this is when we're going to see these things to be in place. And because it's great to be able to take that back to them to say this is happening, but the timeline. Thank you.
No, Derek, I expect nothing less. All right. What we're talking about in the reserve front, we're going to need about a year to start changing something in terms of getting a little help from Congress. There'll be more on that. I've learned, don't say we've went to Congress and talked about things or we have legislation in play, because that would be bad. But we're working on that to kind of lay some of the authorities down. It has been done before. It can be done again. We want to bring it back and make it better. Yes, a lot of this is part of the implementation plan. So I'm focusing right now on Cyber Command 2.0. So here are some of the things that I can bring to the table fairly rapidly. Let's talk proficiency pay for operators. Okay, we already use a TLMS, which is basically giving you a locality pay on steroids to boost your salary. We'll do that by proficiency level. We've already matched the DCWF to Cyber Command work roles, so we're simpatico. Coding across the workforce will allow us to do that. And now, right, we have to talk to the services, because when we make these decisions operationally and we say we want to pay more, and then you walk in for execution and you talk to the comptroller and you talk to your Chico, and they're all like, no, we don't have the money, right? We want to be able to differentiate, similar to NSA, proficiency pay. So we would cap you out at Schedule 4 for, say, basic. If you go up to journeyman, we'll take you up to executive level 2 cap, which is about 213 to 214,000. That's a big difference. And if you add on the ability to incentivize on top of that, up to the command and the situation, you're now much more competitive and you're giving greater incentive for people to stay. Money alone is not going to do that. We're also looking at what do we need to do for just the cyber accepted service system. There are many things we need to improve on there. Policy traditionally in the department moves at a snail's pace. We're going to go, and this is what I plan to step forward, partner with PNR and ask for expedited staffing and a small team to move that policy along. So if you want rank in person, so if you want pay banding, fine. I can give that to you. And if we get permission, we can probably pull that off in about 16 months, right? It's been done before. I know what it takes to do that. It is a Herculean effort, but these are the things I'm trying to bring online there. There are some things we've had to adjust where we had to focus on apprenticeships. I still believe in apprenticeships. I think there's a great opportunity there. I think it ties in nicely with all our academic efforts. We're going to have to back off that just a little bit. We're focused also on skills-based hiring, and we can talk about this, skills-based assessment, skills-based hiring. Instead of saying, well, we'll have something at the end of the year to talk about, within the next month and a half, we plan on putting something out in front. We were actually working very closely at the federal level with OPM. Unfortunately, the very people we were working with went radio silent. You understand what that means. There's some challenges there. So instead of waiting on that, we are going to push forward as the department and bring along any other federal agencies that are willing and can contribute to provide a model. I'm not even looking for perfect, because if we talk to our HR professionals, right, they're looking at it in one perspective. I want to bring them into the room and say, if this process works this way and we automate using AI, because we can bring that online, we can achieve a workable setup. So I'm actually hiring people based on their skills, not on the credentials, qualifications, degrees. Those are ways that you obtain those skills, and they will always be important, but it becomes much easier to assess that. And from a hiring manager standpoint, if you're looking at it, you should have a filter, 100 applicants go through, most can't pass the front door because of the min quals. The process spits it out, and you're looking at 4 to 5 you can quickly scroll through. All right. That's a very simplified scenario, but that needs to be the reality. And instead of taking, and we talk about it, we've lowered time to hire, but that's not the true metric, right? Time to hire generally for us runs under 80 days. But the reality of it is, before those actions go out to hire somebody, you've spent a good 4 to 6 months, 8 months trying to get the thing on the board. It's about pulling all those processes in so we can efficiently identify and acquire that talent. We're going to try to have a pilot up and running, showing results before the end of the year. That's the goal. Some of my team right now are not going to like me, but that's what we have to lean into. And we have to work across the line, because the CIO, speaking on behalf of the department, can't hire a soul. So we have to have P&R in. We have to have the services. Derek, you know this in terms of working with Marine Corps, and Marine Corps HR. If they don't budge, you don't get it through. You don't get it hired. It's about appealing to them and saying, what about your job do you not like? Classifier, what is it that you do that you really don't like? How can I automate and speed that process up? And that's what we're going to go after.
I just have a follow-on for that, because we're going to be here till 4:30 or 5, whatever it is. Okay. So you talked a lot about assessment. And you said by the end of this year, right? So does that include the ability to have like a range or an area where someone can go in and actually be assessed? And it's just
Yes.
It's just the further thing of the range expanding out to the entirety of the cyber workforce.
So, and that is a very good question. And here's kind of a difficulty whenever we deal with the services. So the services have a mantra. I love it. It's called train, man, and equip. All right. Anytime you try to do something, all right, or push change in there, like get out of our space, we're responsible for train, manning, equipping. All right. So I recognize that we will not be bringing an enterprise system for that. There are organizations in this room, without advertising, all right, that can bring those ranges online right now. Not for all the work roles, the capability is there. We're going to show the proof of concept to them and say, for this is how that process worked. And then I want to give the services the maneuver room to decide on which range, which company, or do you want to develop your own? This is how we're going to do it, as long as we provide the consistent requirement / standard. It meets that standard, it meets this process, good to go.
Much.
Yes.
Hi, Patrick. Joe Weber from Pod. Hi. I think you probably pretty much answered what I was going to ask, but we work with large publicly traded companies, and we have a couple of those companies who have had us basically put in place part of our technology where we take in military resumes, particularly cybersecurity. They've noticed there's a lot of really good cybersecurity folks in the government, and we translate their experience and their skills into roles in organizations. So they are looking at, I can see industry is looking at the department, at the DoD, the cybersecurity divisions, as basically a source of candidates that they can get. Now, it strikes me, and I'm on the board of a number of big school district. I look at the kids going out of that and how few of them go into service. But it does strike me that most people, I think, would get a lot of benefit from working in service. And I think particularly the cybersecurity components here are extremely interesting. And I was just wondering if you're looking at, I know you've got different parts of this, looking at embracing the schools more. Are you looking at bringing in and going out to cybersecurity professionals in the workplace, in the industry, who have fantastic skills. They've got tons of experience, but they maybe have not thought about where they could fit. They're not entry level. Somebody said today, cybersecurity is not entry level. Completely agree. But some of these individuals are much higher up with tons of experience. Are you looking at ways to try and bring them into the services?
Well, yes, we are. There was an idea put forward. Mr. Parmenter, Brent Parmenter is the Chief Talent Management Officer for the department. He'll have an opportunity to talk tomorrow. Has put forward an idea similar to direct commissioning. I think we have to play with that. Look, it's not new. We didn't invent anything, and we can't take credit for it. We do it on the medical side of the house. We even have direct commissioning programs on the cyber side of the house. I think on the cyber side of the house, it has not been as successful as we want it to be. It's a matter of, from policy, how do we ingest this and bring that over? But we are looking at that because we realize we have people that want to serve and can serve now, maybe not have that opportunity prior to or never considered it. More importantly, we're also looking at how we reach out, all right, to our audience. I'll be honest, when people say the young people today don't want to serve, disagree. We travel to universities frequently, and if I could give scholarships and jobs while I was there on the spot, I would fill our vacancy rates, at least for our entry and developmental positions for the entire department, in about 4 visits. They are clamoring to be on. Now, we have a messaging problem right now, right? I think the administration, as it looks at where we're going, what we're doing, has publicly said, and the SecDef has said, cyber is a priority. I like to say, when you're doing things and doing things fast, and you look at what's going on, you're going to make mistakes. That's great in industry, but at the government level, we're a bigger tug, okay? You do not turn an aircraft carrier on a dime. So when you cut power on that, how far can you go, right, without dropping anchor? All right, when you go to make that turn sweeping wide, how much room do you need? I think the efficiency teams, as they come in and begin to look at this, they're running on a tight timeline. They're beginning to see we're not going to be able to do things as rapidly as we thought. That doesn't mean there's going to change the urgency of it, but at some point, remember the commission, special government employees, they got 130 days. 130 days to do what decades of previous administrations weren't able to do. I'm not saying they won't be successful. I'm just not going to be as successful as they thought they would be. So this has to die down. We have to focus on what the intent was and go back and assure them, all right, there's going to be a place for you. That we're not fire, fire, fire. We're still looking for talent. And the administration has signaled that. We want to get rid of what we consider non-mission essential, and we want to acquire the best and brightest. We're here to kind of help adjust that message and assure our partners that the mission on January 19th was vital, and the same mission, same purpose hadn't changed on January 21st. Doesn't matter who sits in the Oval Office when it comes to that. Our mission is critical. So we are looking at that. How can we do that? I look at talent, the talent pipeline, and that model, multiple streams. It's not one. It's multiples on multiples. That's how you ensure a steady supply of talent and continue to build.
Thank you.
Okay.
We only have 2 minutes left. Can you do a lightning question? Okay. Did you have a question? I wasn't sure if you were standing or question. Please.
No, I'm going to go real quick and give you 2 innovative thoughts, and we can talk later if you want to. But the first one is, I think you have to question the thing about entry level, that cyber is not an entry level. Because if it's not, then how do you grow your young? You have no opportunity to grow anybody. So you have to figure out, how do I accelerate that process so that new entry is already up to speed when they show up? So there's some thoughts about how to do that.
That's
but
exactly.
you got to question that. You got to question that paradigm and say, that's not right.
So, and I see the dichotomy in both sides of that. So take a knock, for example. You need to learn different things. It doesn't do just one thing. So as you introduce that, and especially relying on our work roles, creating a career path. I've always said we're not going to hire our way out of this situation. I believe we have to build our bench, right? But you don't, the problem is you don't get fully mission capable taking at those low levels. You have to be willing to train, mentor, and bring that person up to full mission capability. And I think that's the disconnect. Right now, the way we're structured, I want somebody fully mission capable day one, let's go. Right? Well, good luck with that. How's that working out for you? And I agree with you. There is a process. There is a way to ingest that talent. You can still go out and try to hire the fully capable, but we're going to have to build our bench along the way.
I'm from area security, by the way, and I'm a recovering SCSPNR guy, and a fighter pilot. So I wrestle with that problem. So that's one problem, and there is a way around it. And I think the key skill is critical thinking, because if you have the ability to critically think, you can do a lot of problem solving. The technical knowledge comes. So I'll throw that out. And then the last thing I have for you real quick, because I know we're running out of time, is the Army Air Corps had 20,000 people in it in 1938. By 1945, they had 1.2 million. So if you want to look at learning from history, look at how the Army Air Corps grew a very critical component during World War II, which was all human capital centric.
Nope, actually thought about that, but it was the motivator and the impetus that drove that we're kind of missing right now. I think I'll shut up. And Chief, I'm really sorry. I'm getting off the stage.